Well, it's really great to be here today, and your whole organization was really founded on the concept of fellowship and service, and really, I think if you're going to be successful in life, those are two good principles to build your foundation on. The thing I love about my bio, and it's much longer than Jason read, is that I actually wrote it. And so all of the great things in my life are on this thing. But one of the things I'm most thankful for is we don't all end up like we started out. I graduated from the Virginia Military Institute in 1971 with a bachelor's degree in English. And if you want to be qualified to run a pharmaceutical company, that's the way to go. I did not do well in college. My life dream when I was in college was to be a college football coach. I wanted to sort of be the next Bear Bryant, but I played football in college. I actually captained the defense that to this day holds the school record for most points allowed, and we gave up 451 points in 10 games and shut out one team. So the good news is we were always on the field because the other team was always scoring. I graduated and I had this belief, because I was the first person from my family to go to college, I had this belief that as soon as I got out of VMI, I would have this long line of people who were dying to hire me. And there was no line when I graduated. But I did get a job coaching football in Memphis. And then I wound up coaching in Stanton, Virginia. And that's when I decided that I wanted to become a college coach. And so the way you become a college coach is you actually get get into a graduate program and become a graduate assistant, and then ultimately you might wind up getting hired. Well, I got a chance to go to Northeast Louisiana University. Anybody here go there? Northeast Louisiana? All right. Well, let me just say this: it ain't Harvard. If you drive by there with your window down, they'll throw a diploma in your car. And so I did not do well in college. My first 4 semesters in college, I had a 1.1. I had a .944 my second semester. My third semester I had a .5, and my fourth semester I had a 1.0. I was on academic probation every semester that you could be on academic probation, except the first and the last, and I did not do well. But I thought, good gosh, I'll get in Northeast Louisiana University. And so I applied to Northeast, and in February of 1974, they sent me a letter and said, "Dear sir, we have reviewed your application and decided to deny your admission. Even we have standards." And so I was sort of at an inflection point in my career, and I decided that, I'm going to start studying what successful people do. And fundamentally, success is nothing but a set of skills. There's a day you couldn't tie your shoe and somebody taught you. There's a day you couldn't ride a bike and somebody taught you. There's a day you couldn't be a financial planner and somebody taught you. So I think you can learn to do anything. I actually read a book that changed my life in every way, written by somebody y'all would probably know, Roger Staubach. And Roger Staubach and Jack and Gary Kinder wrote a book called Winning Strategies in Selling. Now, it's not a very good book. Don't write it down. You're better off buying my book. My book's much better. But in the book, he changed my life. He said this. He said, chances are you'll be the same person 5 years from today that you are today, with the exception of 2 things: the people you meet and the books you read. And the person who won't read is truly no better off than the person who can't read. Now, I read that 10 years after I graduated from college, and what I realized is that in those 10 years, I had been illiterate. I read 3 books from 71 to 81. I read Jaws. I read QB7 by Leon Uris in anticipation of moving to New Jersey to run a drug company. I read The Godfather. And but I realized I was illiterate, so I started reading books. I've read 585 business books since that day. I've read 1 book 69 times. I've written 4 best-selling books. I own a percentage of the best book summary service in America called Read It For Me. I read 25 books a year now, and I actually do 100 book summaries a year. I do 2 every week. They take 12 minutes, so I can spend 25 minutes, and I can learn what the greatest minds in the world learn from reading. So I couldn't tell you any of this stuff that today. I couldn't have told you any of this stuff 10 years ago or 5 years ago. I was at Pfizer one day, because most of my clients historically have been in the pharmaceutical business, and I was at Pfizer one day, and one of their group vice presidents said to me, "How do we get more time with customers?" Gee, I don't know. I never thought about it. I had been in the business for a long time. I had lots of success, but I'd never really thought about how do you get more time with customers. And so I came to the conclusion on my flight home from New York to Scottsdale that time was really a function of the kind of relationship you have with the customer. If you have a great relationship, you don't have any difficulty getting time. If you don't have a relationship, you don't get any time. And so I made the assumption that someone had answered the question, how do you build a valuable business relationship with somebody else? So I bought 6 books. I actually only bought 4 because I had 2 of them. I bought Carnegie's book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, which is still one of the top 100 books sold on Amazon every single day. I bought Leah Lowndes' book, How to Be a People Magnet. I bought 2 books by John Maxwell, Becoming a Person of Influence and How to Get People to Like You. I bought a book by a guy named Nicholas Boothman called How to Get People to Like You in 90 Seconds or Less. And then the last book I bought was How You Can Have Confidence and Power in Dealing with People by Les Giblin. I read all of these books, and all of these books fundamentally said what to do. Okay, you got to be nice, you got to follow up with people, but none of them told you how to do it. And so I said, well, I would really like to figure out, how do you do this? How, what are some ways that you can be nice? What is the mental process that we go through to build a valuable business relationship? And so what I discovered was that there's only 6 levels of relationship you can have with another human being. I don't care who you are. One is they don't know me by name, right? There's 1.3 billion people in India. I don't know any of them. There's 1.5 billion people in China. I don't know any of them. So there's lots of people that we don't know know us by name. The next thing is I want you to know my name. But if you know my name, I then would like for you to like me. If I like you, then I'm far more willing to spend time with you. Now, it doesn't take very long to get somebody to like you. The easiest way to get somebody to like you is be interested in them, not try and get them interested in you. The next level is people that are friendly with me. People that are friendly with me are people that have gotten past the like, but I now, I know something about you, you know something about me, and we talk about that, every single time we get together. The last 2 levels are the hardest levels to get. One, people who trust me. In the top level of the pyramid, I call people who value a relationship with me. See, I wanted a relationship. I mentor college basketball coaches as a hobby. And I wanted to meet the basketball coach at Arizona State, and I live in Phoenix, have a home in Phoenix. I don't live there now, I live in Virginia, but I still wanted to meet the coach at Arizona State. Now, this guy is the 4th youngest coach in America to 400 victories. He's the only coach in America to be Coach of the Year in 3 major conferences, the MAC, the Pac-12, and the ACC. And I didn't know him at all. And I was nobody, still am nobody, but I wanted to meet him. So how did I meet him? I did a thing in my book called pyramid hopping. How do I jump off of your pyramid and meet people that you know that I need to know? And so I asked everybody that I knew, how well do you know Herb Sendek, if at all? Now that's a question you have to ask. Don't say, do you know them? They'll say yes. And then you say, would you introduce me? And then they'll get queasy. You say, how well do you know Herb Sendek, if at all? One of my friends said yes. And then I said this, how comfortable would you be introducing me? He said, well, I'll be totally comfortable. I'll have breakfast. You guys have breakfast together. Now, the one thing I know is that when I want to meet somebody, I better have a reason for wanting to meet them. I want to be there to actually do something for them. So I knew that the question he was going to ask me, because if I'm trying to establish a relationship with him, he's going to want to know, well, what can you do for me? And if he doesn't want to know that, then, I'd be surprised. So I go there, and sure enough, he says, tell me what you want from me. Now, he knew that I mentored 2 other college basketball coaches, ones that he knew. He knew that I do it for fun. I don't do it for money. And I said, well, look, I don't want T-shirts and I don't want tickets. I can pay for both. What I would like is access to your kids, because the 2 things your kids are not going to learn in college, and by the way, if you have kids in college or have a kid in college, you know that what I'm about to say is true. Your kids are not going to learn how to set and achieve stretch goals in college, which is sick because they should. As much money as we're paying for them to go to college, they ought to learn that. The second thing they're not going to learn is how to build a valuable business network. The reality is when you graduate from college, you need both. You need to be really good at setting and achieving stretch goals, and you better be pretty good at building a network of people where if you're really good at something, that actually matters. And I said, I want to teach that to your kids. That began my relationship with Coach Sendek. And so what I try and get people to understand is that relationship building is fundamentally a process, and that's what I learned from reading this book. Every great relationship that you have basically goes through 3 steps. And if you know what those 3 steps are, you can build a relationship with people that you don't naturally connect with. Now, The Relationship Edge in Business, which is the book I wrote, is fundamentally based on 3 very simple concepts. 1, how do you build a relationship with someone that you don't naturally connect with? Now, that's about 75% of the people that you meet, right? Only about a quarter of the people you meet do you naturally connect with, that you sit with them next to you on an airplane. When you get off the plane, you feel like you made a friend. 75% of the time, they ain't interested in talking to you. And so the second reason for the relationship edge is to teach people, how do you maintain relationships? Experts say that if you stay out of contact with people for 1 month, you lose 4% of your influence. So you stay out of contact with them for 12 months, you lose 48% of your influence. I don't want to lose influence with people that I have a great relationship. So one of the things that we try and get people to think about is, how can I be more intentional and disciplined in actually maintaining the great relationships that I have? The last thing is, how do you leverage relationships? If you have a relationship and don't leverage it, you're making a huge mistake. The reality is, almost everybody that you have a great relationship with has their own network. And there's probably people in that network that you could fundamentally access and get them to help you. Now, they're never going to help you if they don't know what help you need, because your best friend's not a mind reader. If you want to meet somebody that's, used to run a drug company, you just simply say, hey, who do you know, if anybody, that may have run a drug company? You ask 10 people that, somebody might have an answer. I wanted to meet the CEO of a large ad agency holding company. And so I went to everybody I met and I said, who do you know that runs a large ad agency holding company? One of my friends said, Nick Colucci. I know Nick Colucci really well. I said, how comfortable would you be introducing me? I'll introduce you right now. And so next thing I know, I'm really good friends with Nick Colucci. So the point I try and make is that if relationships are important, and I don't think they're important. I used to think they're important. I now think they're everything, because the quality of our personal life and the quality of our professional life is directly related to the quality of relationships that we have. And so if they're important, then my bias is, let's get more intentional about how do we build them, how do we leverage them, and how do we actually maintain them. So the book is really focused on 6 different principles, right? What is the relationship process? The process starts with, I have to believe that the other person would want a relationship with me. If you don't think they will, you'll be right. I'm watching Larry King one night, and he's got Sheryl Crow on, and he asked her at the end of her, and I like Sheryl Crow, I got to be honest with you. I think she's kind of nice. He asked her, how's your love life? And she says, I don't have one. And I'm saying, dang, man, I got to move. I like her. I'll ask her out. Of course, then I realize I'm married. That's probably a bad idea. And but why is nobody asking her out? Because they don't think she'll go. And if you don't think she'll go and you don't ask her, guess what? You'll be right. And so you have to believe that the other person would want a relationship with you. Now, the second thing you have to do is you have to believe that you could actually bring some value to that relationship. Somebody said earlier, when you give, you get. I think when you give, you get is such a powerful concept. And I think when you give of yourself to others, when you share your wisdom, when you share your network, it comes back to you 100-fold. But you have to start with the right mindset. You have to believe that relationships are everything. You have to believe that you have something of value. And you have to believe that the other person would want a relationship with you regardless of how successful they are. I had breakfast this morning with a young woman who's a pharmaceutical sales rep, and she reached out to me and she said, really, I'm trying to get a job in a training department, and you're the guru of training in the pharmaceutical industry. Is there any way I could get with you? I said, well, I'm going to be in Dallas next week. I'll have breakfast with you. Now, but the number of people like her that will call me is very small, because they'll all say, well, Jerry's, he's really busy. He runs this company. He trains all these people. Well, if you decide not to call me, I ain't ever going to talk to you. And if you call, then you're either going to find out one or two things. I'm a fairly decent guy, or I'm a jerk. And either way, I think you'd want to know. And so I want people to really think about, number one, what you think. The second thing is, what do you ask? What do you find out? The way to get somebody to actually want a relationship with you is you got to ask them questions. I'm on an airplane in Chicago. Does anybody know who Larry Wingett is? If you don't, you should. W-I-N-G-E-T. He calls himself the pit bull of motivation. And he's a really interesting guy. And he's got like 9 rings. He's got purple cowboy shirts. He got purple cowboy boots and starched blue jeans. And I sat next to him in first class in Chicago, and he looks at me before we take off and he says this: I hate to talk to people on airplanes. That's his opening. And I'm saying, well, gee, nobody's ever said that to me before. And I sat there trying to process this, because I was blown away. And then I said this to myself: okay, Jerry, you've written 3 best-selling books on relationship building. Accept his challenge. And I did. And so right before we took off, I said, say, man, can I ask you a personal question before you put them headphones on? yeah. And I said, haven't I seen you on television? He said, phew. He pulled those things out and he said, yeah, what'd you see me on? I said, well, I saw you on like a Good Morning Arizona show, but the way you answered that question seemed like to me you've been on something else. And he said, oh man, I got this whole series on A&E called Hey Big Spender. I said, tell me about it. And he did for 3 hours. He never asked me my name. He didn't ask me what I did for a living. He didn't ask me anything about me. He told me things candidly he should have kept to himself. And when we landed, he jumps up out of his seat and he looks at me and he said, say, man, where do you live? I said, well, I live right here in Phoenix. He said, you and I got to get together. You are the most interesting person I've ever met. But you see, we all have an invisible tattoo here that says, make me feel important. And the easiest way to make somebody feel important is to actually listen to them. And now, one of the things that I have in the book is the 20 questions that you ought to ask somebody if you don't know what to ask them. And I call them the Link 20. How do you link up with other people? By asking questions to get them talking about what they sell, about what's important to them. I'm trying to get people to talk about what they treasure. And I don't care whether it's what they treasure personally or what they treasure professionally. I want them to talk about what they treasure. If you ask me what I treasure, I do treasure VMI football, even though we haven't had a winning season in 30 years. And my wife and I fund an out-of-state scholarship, and I'm on the board of all the alumni agencies at my college because I'm passionate about the kind of education these young people get. But I want us to win, and I keep thinking one of these days before I die, they actually will win. And I'm just hoping I live long enough to see it. But I want to talk about what people treasure. You want to talk to me about what I treasure? Talk to me about, continuous learning. Talk to me about my mentoring. Talk to me about the work I do with these young, underprivileged African Americans every summer in the college orientation workshop program. Talk to me about my charitable work. I want people talking about what they treasure. When you start talking to me about what you treasure, here's what happens. You start feeling good about you and I talking, and what happens is you have this small, unconscious conversation with yourself that you say, I like this, I like this, I like this, and it brings us closer together. Now, once I'm asking those questions, I'm also trying to learn something about you that will extend the dialogue, extend the conversation, and get me some information that would enable me to have a conversation with you before. That's why on this app that I've built called Really Linked, who do you really want to be linked to, there's a place where you can take notes. So when you actually do talk to somebody and they tell you that they're closed on their house October the 30th, you can capture that, and the next time you see them, you can ask them about that. The third thing is, so it's what you think, what you ask, and lastly, all relationships are built on actions. And our actions really fall into two categories: persistent, consistent, predictable actions over time. When I speak ordinarily for money, which I do, I get a standing ovation 95% of the time. That's why people pay me, what I think is an extraordinary amount of money to do it, because it's predictable. You see, and if you're going to be successful in life, two things are true. One, you better be really good at what you do. I don't care what you do, you better be really good at it. And secondly, you better have a network of people where being good at something matters. Because if you're really good at what you do and you don't have a network, you ain't got nothing. And if you got a network and you ain't really good at what you do, you ain't got anything. You have to have both. And so what I'm trying to do is to create actions that build a network so that people want to do business with me because I'm me. Now, why is the relationship edge important? Number one, there's two reasons. One, because if I have a relationship with you, you listen to me differently. Now that's a very important point. You don't listen to me, you listen to me differently. And so I can call you at 10 o'clock at night and talk to you about a timeshare, and you'll be off the phone in a minute. If I call one of my close business associates and talk about timeshare in Montana, they'll listen as long as I want to talk. And the only thing different is the nature of the relationship. And so what I try and do is to get people to understand that, number one, relationship building makes your job and your life more fun, because you have lots of high quality relationships, then your life is a whole lot more fun and it's more engaging. And the second thing is it gets people to listen to you differently. And I don't care what you do, if you're in business, if you're in a civic organization where you're trying to implore people to help you and do something, then actually having those relationships where people want to do it is really, really important. So, what I try and get young people to understand when I talk about the relationships is understand that sooner you begin to build your network, the more successful you're likely to be. But to build it is not enough. You actually have to maintain it. And then you also have to leverage it. You have to ask the question like, who do you know that I need to know? That's a very simple question. Most people never ask it.